Hey everyone, today we have a super exciting video. It's a problem that I came across and I really wanted to share with you how I solved it, and that is how to scroll to the highest most item or component in React. Okay, what I mean by this is perhaps you've got a form and you're answering things. However, someone's missed one, right? So you want to bring their attention to it by scrolling to the top most unanswered question or block or component. That part is going to be totally up to us. We're going to use ref for this, okay? So it's going to be exciting. Let's do it. Okay, so let's do it. As you are probably here because you want to learn how to scroll to the topmost unanswered thing, unanswered form, unanswered question, whatever. I assume you know how to use React because we are doing this in React, which is why I've already gone ahead and set up a project in React. It's running, as you can see here. And I've gone ahead and basically removed all the unnecessary files. So in the index.js file, we have this code, okay? In the CSS file, we have nothing, and I've just kept the index CSS file. And in the app.js file, this is all the code we have. And I swapped this to be a functional expression instead, right? So 3 files, and this is all that's in them. Please pause if you need to get the code, but hopefully that makes sense. It's usually what I start with when I make any React tutorial. Okay, great. So once again, the app is running, and if you look in the browser, you should see this, and I've just gotten up the console log in order to make our lives a bit easier. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is just create 4 cards, okay, so that we can visually see the scrolling happen, and I'm going to make sure that happens by making them pretty big. So let's go ahead and do that. In fact, what I'm going to do is make a component. So in the source directory, I'm going to create a new directory, and I'm just going to call it components. And in the components, we're going to have one component called the card.js file. JS is for JavaScript. And in fact, I'm just going to copy this just like that and then change card, our app to be card, sorry. So there's our card component essentially. Now, card component really should be articles. So I'm just going to make sure that this returns an article element, okay? JSX element, not quite HTML. And great. So here's our card component, and I'm just going to style this up. Let's go ahead and give it a class name. We could have picked out the article, but you know, for good measure, I just want it to be readable in the CSS file that this is a card that we're styling. Making sure to, of course, spell article correctly. So I'm just going to grab the card like so, dot for class name, of course. I assume you know that, as I assume you know JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, and you are now using a React and struggling a bit with the use ref. Okay, so let's make each card super high, just so the scrolling is really obvious. 600 pixels wide, let's say, and let's just give them a background color of red. And then let's space them out from each other so they don't just look like one lump, one lead lump. And let's make the color inside white as in the text and make the font really big again, just so it's obvious for demo purposes when I number each of these cards. And I'm just going to align the text center. So text align center. Okay, great. So now in here, I'm of course going to import that card. So here is my card once again, and I've styled it to look like a red rectangle. So import card from, and then we need to get the path of the card where we need to go into, so into the components and get the file called card. As we're in a JS file, JavaScript file, we don't need to put the JS extension there, it's implied. So we've imported the card. Now let's go ahead and use it. So if I just put in one card like so, so one card component, and check this out on the browser, and great, here is our one card. But how many should we have? How many do we want to, scroll up and down to? I'm going to say 4. So for this, all I'm going to do is collect, let's say we're going to start with 4 cards. cards. Let's just name them card IDs to make it really obvious that we want each card to have an ID, and it's the ID of the card that we're going to scroll to. So let's have 4 cards. Of course, in JavaScript, we start, or in computing, any computing, we start counting from 0. So this is going to be my card with the next 0, or something that represents a card, and so on. Okay, so of course, when you're doing this yourself, please feel free to replace this with whatever data you wish. This is just a demo. So we've got an array that's going to represent our 4 cards. Let's carry on. First off, instead of just putting a card in here, I'm going to essentially use the card IDs and say that for each card ID, I'm going to map that onto a card. So I'm just going to go ahead and, do we need index? We don't, I guess, if it's using a card ID. So for each card ID, so for each of these items that lives in the array, I want to map that on to a card component. Okay, so just like so, I'm going to minimize this as we don't need it. So that's what I have done, and I'm just going to pass through the card ID into each card. Okay, so there we go. And of course, this also needs a key, so I'm just going to use the card ID as a key. Great. So this means that if I now console log, if I pass it through, so I destructure the prop, this is me destructuring the prop and just getting the card ID. And actually, I could just, let's just for now return the card ID so it's visible in the article element. See? There we go. 0, 1, 2, 3. Wonderful. So great. We have mapped information onto 4 card elements. That information really is just the ID of the card, but that's fine for us for now. That's all we really care about. Okay, so now what I want to happen is that if I click on this one, the card with the ID 0, it will take me to the top most unclicked element, which is this one, right? And if I refresh and clear everything, say we click on the card with the ID of number 2, it will take me to the top most unanswered or unclicked, topmost unclicked element, which is going to be this one right here, right? Because 0 is the topmost unclicked element. Okay, so think of it as inputs. You might want to, scroll to that input. I'm of course not using inputs for now because inputs are too small. You wouldn't really see the difference. That's why I've chosen these big cards. Okay, so how do we make that happen? Well, let's go back to the app. So what I essentially need is to collect which items have been clicked and which ones haven't. So I'm going to do so thanks to use state. So I'm going to write unclicked card ID. So I'm going to collect the unclicked card IDs and set them using set unclicked card IDs. So unclicked, great. And for this, of course, we need use state. And the state of unclicked card IDs, well, at the beginning, all of them are unclicked, right? So I could just pass through this array essentially, okay? So at the beginning, all the unclicked cards are all the card IDs. I've just passed that through and used use state in order to assign this value, which I've passed through here, to this constant. And if we want to change it, we use this. Okay, so we of course need to import use state. So let's go ahead and do that up here. Import use state. And we're also going to have to import use effect. I'm just going to do that while I'm here from React. Okay, wonderful. So we've done that. Let's get to actually hooking this up to the cards. And to do that, we're going to have to pass through the unclicked cards into the card. So whatever unclicked card is at any point in time. And we're also going to pass through the method of changing if something has been clicked or not. Okay, Great, which means we of course need to pass that through into here. So set unclicked cards, but also the unclicked cards IDs. Okay, so we've passed that through. And we're going to write a function here. Let's actually split it out. So I'm going to define that function handle click up here. And then on the click, so on click of the article, well, I just want to handle the click. Yeah? And what happens here? Well, if we click it, we need to change the array of unclicked cards, right? And we do so by getting whatever the unclicked card IDs are. So at the moment, there's 0, 1, 2, 3 in there, 3 IDs. And we're going to filter out by the ID. And if the ID does not equal the card ID, so whatever card ID we passed in through here, then they can remain in the array. So shall we check that out? We can use 2 equal signs. So that is what I am doing with this handle click, right? I'm filtering out this particular card ID that has been passed through into the card component if we click on it, okay? Leaving us with the remaining card IDs. So now if I just console log the card IDs, the unclick card IDs, sorry, because this will stay constant. We're not changing this, we're just changing the unclicked IDs. So at the beginning, we are starting out, like I said, with 4 unclicked IDs. And if I click 0, the card with the ID 0, it's been removed from the array. So this is looking good. If I click on the card with ID 1, removed, and so on, I'm just going to check they all work. And great, so now we've clicked on all of them. There are no unclicked card IDs. Okay, so hopefully that's making sense to everyone so far. So we're doing that, but we're not scrolling yet. Well, to scroll, we actually need to figure out what the highest number in the array is so we can scroll to it and give refs to each of the cards. So we need to map refs to each of the cards. So to do this, let's just get rid of that. I'm going to have to get all the refs. So I'm going to create refs create refs using the create ref method from React. Okay, and I'm going to do so based off the card IDs because we need to use this array, not this one, because it's not going to change. Each of our cards needs a ref. And I'm going to just reduce. So let me just write this out first before I explain it to you. Okay, so what I am going to do is essentially, make sure that says card IDs. For each of these items, I'm going to go into each one and use the method of create ref on it, then return it and stick it in an object. Okay, so now if I console log refs, I'm just going to show you what that looks like. We of course need to import create ref from React. And great. So using the array of 0, 1, 2, 3, I've essentially created an object which has 4 objects, each with a ref made for it. Okay? So all of them have current null. However, this will change. I'm going to keep that up here for now. So we've got our refs. Let's now onto each card. Why is it not liking this? Typo in unclick. Set unclicked. Unclicked? Why is there a typo? I think it's fine, right? Maybe it's saying one of these should be capital. Yeah, okay, fine. Okay, fine, let's change it. It's screaming at me and I don't like it screaming at me. Sorry, this is delaying our tutorial, but I've got a complex about it now. So also here, unclicked, 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 set unclicked. I really hope that's all of them. Great. and then also change them unclicked card IDs. So now I've done them, let's carry on. Great. So now let's pass through the ref. So here's my ref, and all I'm going to do is get these refs, and if it's the first one, so I'm just going to go with by the card ID, right? That is absolutely fine, as the card IDs are 0, 1, 2, 3. And I'm just going to pass that through so that it passes through the first ref, the second ref, the third one, and the fourth, and so on. So there we go. That is now passed through correctly. Great. So this means that now here on the card, refs you don't pass through with the props. Okay, these are all props that have been destructured. We need to pass through the ref next, so that's separate. So I'm going to do that, okay? Separate. Here is one parameter, essentially. Here's a second parameter. And now we're going to have to wrap the card in forward ref. Again, this is imported from React, so we're going to have to import that up here. Import forward ref from React. Great. And then that just means that we can use the ref here. Okay, we've passed it through correctly now. Okay, so whatever it is, we're passing it through and attaching it to the article. Great. Great. I'm just going to get rid of every console log that we have now so that we can carry on without any mess. So now that we have that and we've passed through each ref onto each component, I'm going to use effects in order to actually get the highest component each time we click on a card. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to pass through a callback like so as my first parameter, and as the second parameter, I'm going to pass through array, which is going to hold our dependencies. And these, whatever I put in here, whether it's a constant, a variable, every time this changes, it will trigger the use effect. So when do we want to trigger the use effect? Well, I guess when the unclicked card IDs change, right? So I'm going to pass that through as a dependency. And each time this changes, then we're going to trigger this. So to do this, what do we want to happen? We want to scroll to highest unclicked card ID. Right? And to do this, we have a lovely method with math min, and we just can essentially get the unclicked card IDs and pass them through, and then save this as the highest ID. So if I console log highest ID now, I'm just going to show you what happens. Highest ID, we get nan. This is because even though we're passing through the array, we actually need to, I guess, spill it out into the method mathmin using these 3 dots. Okay, so now if we look in here, great. Our highest ID is 0, and if I click on it, you will see the highest ID is 1. And if I click on 1, 2, and then so on. If I click on 2, the highest ID is 3. However, if I click on this one, we get infinity, right? And we don't want this. We need to do some error handling. So we want to say that we can only do this as long as unclicked IDs is in length is larger than 0. Okay, then we want to do this. So now that means that if I go ahead and just click on all of them again, okay, that's it. It stops working, right? Because the unclicked card ID's length is not larger than 0. What we also need to do, maybe I'll do this a little bit later actually, let's actually get that highest ID so we can pass it through into the ref so we know which ref to scroll to. So I'm going to get the refs, I'm going to pass through the highest ID, which is either going to be 0, 1, 2, or 3. Which will return the correct ref to us that we need to scroll to. And I'm going to use current scroll into view, and then just say that the behavior I want is going to be smooth. Great. And before we do anything else, I'm actually just going to add a header up here to make it even more obvious that we are scrolling. So I've just added the header element, and now I'm going to pick it out in here and just give it a height of 500 pixels so we can really see the behavior happening, because at the moment you won't see it, but I know there's an error. So see, I refresh, it immediately scrolls to 0, which is the highest ID, because that's what we told it to do, but we haven't clicked on anything. So I don't want this behavior. I only want this to essentially scroll if, so I'm just going to do and the unclicked card ID's length is also larger than the card ID's length. Okay. So this just means that now, if I refresh, it's just as if we go onto the page, right? Here we are, nothing's scrolling, nothing's moving. And only once I start clicking on these, so this time let's hit 2. And what's the behavior we expect? We expect it to scroll to the square with ID 0, right? And it does. Highest ID 0. And what if we now click on 0? This goes to 1. And if we now click on 3, where will it scroll to? 1, because that one is the last one unclicked. Amazing. Other things you could have also done is, you didn't have to really put this into an object. You could have put it into an array. That is also fine too. You're essentially just creating objects, right, and putting them in an array like this. I already mentioned the index thing. So instead of using the card ID, you could have used an index if, say, the card ID wasn't a number, and instead pass that index through into the rest, which will bring back either the first item in the array, second item, third, fourth, and so on. So that is also something you could have done. I, of course, didn't have to because my card IDs are pretty boring. And another thing you might want to do is add the missing dependencies of card lengths and refs to the dependencies array. Okay, so I'm just going to do that now for best practice. There we go. So hopefully that makes sense to you. If you want to know how to do this in, say, a quiz, for example, like BuzzFeed, where it prompts you to, click on the unanswered questions, if you're perhaps building a form where you want to scroll to the input, then I really recommend having a go at this BuzzFeed clone. It will really help you out. Or if you want me to make one specifically for forms, it won't be that different, right? We're just scrolling to an input rather than a card, but I can do that for you if you want. So great. I hope you had fun, and I'll see you again.